admitted, the fundamental reason for this avoidance is probably the fear of the ghost. That this is the real motive with the Tuaregs we are positively informed. They dread the return of the dead man's spirit, and do all they can to avoid it by shifting their camp after a death, ceasing for ever to pronounce the name of the departed, and eschewing everything that might be regarded as an evocation or recall of his soul. Hence they do not, like the Arabs, designate individuals by adding to their personal names the names of their fathers. They never speak of "so and so, son of so and so." They give to every man a name which will live and die with him. So among some of the Victorian tribes in Australia personal names were rarely perpetuated, because the natives believed that any one who adopted the name of a deceased person would not live long. Probably his ghostly namesake was supposed to come and fetch him away to the spirit land. The same fear of the ghost which moves people to suppress his old name naturally leads all persons who bear a similar name to exchange it for another, lest its utterance should attract the attention of the ghost, who cannot reasonably be expected to discriminate between all the different applications of the same name. Thus we are told that in the Adelaide and Encounter Bay tribes of South Australia the repugnance to mentioning the names of those who have died lately is carried so far that persons who bear the same name as the deceased abandon it, and either adopt temporary names or are known by any others that happen to belong to them. A similar custom prevails among some of the Queensland tribes, but the prohibition to use the names of the dead is not permanent, though it may last for some years. In some Australian tribes the change of name thus brought about is permanent; the old name is laid aside for ever, and the man is known by his new name for the rest of his life, or at least until he is obliged to change it again for a like reason. Among the North American Indians all persons, whether men or women, who bore the name of one who had just died, were obliged to abandon it and to adopt other names, which was formerly done at the first ceremony of mourning for the dead. In some tribes to the east of the Rocky Mountains this change of name lasted only during the season of mourning, but in other tribes on the Pacific coast of North America it seems to have been permanent. Sometimes, by an extension of the same reasoning, all the near relations of the deceased changed their names, whatever they may happen to be, doubtless from a fear that the sound of the familiar names might lure back the vagrant spirit to its old home. Thus, in some Victorian tribes, the ordinary names of all the next of kin were disused during the period of mourning, and certain general terms, prescribed by custom, were substituted for them. To call a mourner by his own name was considered an insult to the departed, and often led to fighting and bloodshed. Among Indian tribes of North western America, near relations of the deceased often changed their names "under an impression that spirits will be attracted back to earth if they hear familiar names often repeated." Among the Kiowa Indians the name of the dead is never spoken in the presence of the relatives, and on the death of any member of a family all the others take new names. This custom was noted by Raleigh's colonists on Roanoke Island more than 3 centuries ago. Among the Lengua Indians not only is a dead man's name never mentioned, but all the survivors change their names also. They say that Death has been among them and has carried off a list of the living, and that he will soon come back for more victims. Hence, in order to defeat his fell purpose, they change their names, believing that on his return Death, though he has got them all on his list, will not be able to identify them under their new names, and will depart to pursue the search elsewhere. Nicobarese mourners take new names in order to escape the unwelcome attentions of the ghost, and for the same purpose they disguise themselves by shaving their heads, so that the ghost is unable to recognise them. Further, when the name of the deceased happens to be that of some common object, such as an animal or plant or fire or water, it is sometimes considered necessary to drop that word in ordinary speech and to replace it by another. A custom of this sort, it is plain, may easily be a potent agent of change in language, For where it prevails to any considerable extent, many words must constantly become obsolete and new ones spring up. And this tendency has been remarked by observers who have recorded the custom in Australia, America, and elsewhere. For example, with regard to the Australian aborigines, it has been noted that "the dialects change with almost every tribe. Some tribes name their children after natural objects, and when the person so named dies, the word is never again mentioned. Another word has therefore to be invented for the object after which the child is called." The writer gives as an instance the case of a man whose name Karla signified fire. When Karla died, a new word for fire had to be introduced. Hence, adds the writer, the language is always changing. Again, in the Encounter Bay tribe of South Australia, if a man of the name of Unke, which means water, were to die, the whole tribe would be obliged to use some other word to express water for a considerable time after his decease. The writer, who records this custom, surmises that it may explain the presence of a number of synonyms in the language of the tribe. This conjecture is confirmed by what we know of some Victorian tribes, whose speech comprised a regular set of synonyms to be used instead of the common terms by all members of a tribe in times of mourning. For instance, if a man called Wa (crow) departed this life, during the period of mourning for him nobody might call a crow a Wa; everybody had to speak of the bird as a Narapat. When a person who rejoiced in the title of Ringtail Opossum (Wayan) had gone the way of all flesh, his sorrowing relations and the tribe at large were bound for a time to refer to ringtail opossums by the more sonorous name of Manunkurt. If the community were plunged in grief for the loss of a respected female who bore the honourable name of Turkey Bustard, the proper name for turkey bustards, which was Barim Barim, went out, and Tillit Tillich came in. And so, mutatis mutandis, with the names of black cockatoo, grey duck, gigantic crane, kangaroo, eagle, dingo, and the rest. A similar custom used to be constantly transforming the language of the Abipones in Paraguay, amongst whom, however, a word once abolished seems never to have been revived. New words, says the missionary Dobrizhoffer, sprang up every year like mushrooms in a night, because all words that resembled the names of the dead were abolished by proclamation and others coined in their place. The mint of words was in the hands of the old women of the tribe, and whatever term they stamped with their approval and put into circulation was immediately accepted without a murmur by high and low alike, and spread like wildfire through every camp and settlement of the tribe. You would be astonished, says the same missionary, to see how meekly the whole nation acquiesces in the decision of a withered old hag, and how completely the old familiar words fall instantly out of use, and are never repeated either through force of habit or forgetfulness. In the 7 years that Dobrizhoffer spent among these Indians, the native word for jaguar was changed thrice, and the words for crocodile, thorn, and the slaughter of cattle underwent similar though less varied vicissitudes. As a result of this habit, the vocabularies of the missionaries teemed with erasures, old words having constantly to be struck out as obsolete, and new words inserted in their place. In many tribes of British New Guinea the names of persons are also the names of common things. The people believe that if the name of a deceased person is pronounced his spirit will return, and as they have no wish to see it back among them, the mention of his name is tabooed, and a new word is created to take its place, whenever the name happens to be a common term of the language. Consequently many words are permanently lost or revived with modified or new meanings. In the Nicobar Islands a similar practice has similarly affected the speech of the natives. A most singular custom, says Mr. de Roepstorff, prevails among them, which one would suppose must most effectually hinder the making of history, or at any rate the transmission of historical narrative. By a strict rule, which has all the sanction of Nicobar superstition, no man's name may be mentioned after his death. To such a length is this carried, that when, as very frequently happens, the man rejoiced in the name of Fowl, Hat,